Welcome to Extension Connection on Super Talk 1270. Thoughtful information and discussion with experts from both Burleigh and Morton County Extension Service offices. Extension Connection provides advice on family nutrition, issues in agriculture, lawn and garden, community leadership, homeowner concerns, and so much more. Live from the Super Talk 1270 studio, this is Extension Connection.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Extension Connection on Super Talk 1270 Radio. We're happy to be here from Burleigh County this morning. My name is Chandra Zeman-Belinsky, and I'm the Family and Consumer Sciences Agent. And I'm joined by Amelia Dahl. Let her introduce herself here.
Hello, everyone. I am Amelia Dahl. I'm the 4-H Youth Development Agent in Burleigh County.
And we are, actually, this is something that our topic today is managing stress for better health. Whether you're an adult, a youth, stress is something that happens to everybody.
Stress has no age limit.
No age limit. And it's a very real thing for all ages, is the important thing to recognize here. And stress can hit one person at a different magnitude than the next. It's interesting to know, as we get into this subject today, that one of our publications, we do have a publication on our website, or if it's not there posted, it will be here shortly, because I didn't give it to our admin until just now, so it's my fault. But we have a great publication out there. It's actually 24 pages long. You don't have to read the whole thing. The first few pages, it starts on page 4 after the introductions. You're able to take a quiz on to determine how vulnerable you are to stress. That is a hard word. So, you can this is targeted toward adults, but later on in the publication, we get into youth stress, family stress, and we get into, how we're able to help someone out. So let's start with this publication, and we can start you out by thinking, and I do encourage you to check out our website. You can just use your search engine and type in there Burleigh County Extension. It should come up as one of our hot topics. And the publication, page 4, starts out with a 20-question quiz. We won't get into too much of it, but it's things like, how apt are you to be stressed right now? I'm not going to say vulnerable anymore.
It's a tough word to say.
I know. I eat at least one hot, balanced meal a day. And you can score each item from 1, almost always, to 5, never. Okay. So the higher the score, the more stressed you are. Okay, so if you're not very stressed, you're going to say 1s to these. Okay, so if you eat at least one hot, balanced meal a day, you can say 1, almost always. And if this is not you, it may be telling. Okay, so a couple other examples. I get 7 to 8 hours of sleep at least 4 nights a week.
I wish.
I know. The only reason why I do right now is because I'm pregnant, and I absolutely cannot function without it, which is another added. You've got to consider your situation. Right. But, okay, I think Amelia and I both had the same class at one point last May, and it really stuck with me because they just randomly asked, I don't know, it was like a dozen of us in the class, maybe a little bit more, how much sleep did you get last night? And I think the majority was 4 to 6 hours. There only were a few that had 6 hours even. All of us were, most of us were out of town. Some of us were at our homes. And it was the majority. I mean, a lot of people had 4 hours of sleep. That was baffling to me.
I know sleep is good for you, and I'm always constantly amazed, which I probably shouldn't be, at how much better I feel when I get a good night's sleep.
I know.
But it is miraculous what it can do for your stress level, your ability to cope with different things happening in your life. Kind of being able to roll with the punches, I think, is something that definitely is a benefit from getting enough sleep.
Yeah. So recognizing if you're vulnerable to stress is important. So I encourage you to get on. I mean, some of these have to do with substance abuse, tobacco, alcohol. I like this one, though. I give and receive affection regularly. And if you do, that's a good thing. It can mitigate stress.
We were actually just talking about this in the office right before we came about Valentine's was last week.
Oh, yeah, right.
And we were talking about who got anything for Valentine's Day and who didn't. And I think that definitely creates a stressor in a relationship when there's an expectation that you're going to get something whether it be for Valentine's Day or your birthday.
It's true.
And then you don't get anything. And then there's a tension. Or one person gives something and the other one doesn't.
Right. Okay, I like that. And we're going to come back to that because part of managing stress is taking care of your relationship. So this is part of it. And there was a training that I took here, and I think it was 7 Habits for Highly Effective People. I think it was in that one that you talk about an emotional bank. So how much are you withdrawing and how often are you depositing into that account, which is a neat way of thinking about it. So that is interesting. I mean, and that applies to what you guys were talking about to even like in my case, my mom is such a giver, but on Mother's Day, she really expects something. And so I realize I have to. So I get stressed on Mother's Day because I know she wants something and I, a lot of times don't know what to do or whatever. So,
well, and I think that also stems off of our love language, like how we communicate, how we send and receive love. Because
that's true.
I am very much a person who loves to give gifts. Like that's how I show my affection.
Okay.
And if you are in a relationship, be it a marriage, a coworker relationship with someone who doesn't show it the same way,
right,
it's taxing on that relationship.
Right. I wonder if my mom might be the gift one because she does give a lot. But I do think she wants to receive. So, anyways, this is good to know, and the affection thing as well. Am I in good health? And it's very important to know that when you're considering your appropriate weight, balance it with your height. It doesn't necessarily have to be what you think it should be. It's what the doctor thinks it should be. Okay, so there's a balance there. But I encourage you to take that quiz. And let's define stress, first of all, so that we can go right into our first break here. So we'll take just a moment. But let's define stress before we take off. What is stress? It can be physical, mental, and or emotional strain or tension. Okay, so it manifests in many different ways, and it can be there's a continuum of stress. It can be significant all the way to depression. So strain or tension, and the longer you have that, the earlier you catch it, the better. The longer you have it, the more likely you are to get depressed. And depression is preventable for 80% of us. Okay, well, we'll take a break, and we'll come back and talk more about stress and how to manage it.
Right now, 32.
Mary Lou Henner, weekdays on Super Talk 1270.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Extension Connection. You're with Burleigh County this week. My name is Chandra Zeman-Belinsky. I'm the Family and Consumer Sciences Agent, and I'm joined here by Amelia Dahl, the 4-H and Youth Development Agent. We're talking about stress today. Everybody has stress at one point or another, more than likely. And it's a very real concern for, of course, adults and even children. The whole family can feel stress at one time. An entire nation can feel stress at one time. So we're talking about, how to recognize it and what to do about it later in the program. Amelia, you had a really good definition, I think, from one of the extension programs.
Yeah, North Carolina State Extension defines in their publication about helping kids cope with stress as stress is a life event or situation that causes imbalance in an individual's life.
I like that.
Imbalance. So I think one thing that I've always been told is stress is something that you can't do without. Everybody needs a little stress in their life.
Yeah, it can be positive.
But how you handle the stress is ultimately the test.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was interesting here. So we'll talk a little bit about adults and incorporate youth there too. So actually, most physician visits happen to be stress related. So when you go to the doctor, it can be stress related because your immune system is then compromised. You're worn down. Stress is linked to the 6 leading causes of death in the U.S., which are heart disease, cancer, stroke, chronic lower respiratory diseases, accidents, and then diabetes. And that can be stress-related if you're not type 1. 9 out of 10 adults have had serious stress in their life. How about youth? Are there any numbers of how many kids probably experience it?
I don't have any hard numbers, but I know that a lot of our adolescents are seeing an increase in the amount of stress that they have due to both school and family and work, and learning that work-life balance. Every generation says of the adolescents during their time that, oh, they don't know how good they have it, and kids these days, you hear that all the time. But it actually studies are actually showing that the amount of stress that youth are experiencing is actually on the incline. It's not just kids being kids.
It really does feel like that. We were just visiting my grandparents, and they're in their late 80s, early 90s. This was last Monday here on President's Day when we were off work, fortunately. Thank you very much, Presidents, for what you do. And my grandma said, back in the horse and buggy days, sure, that was 24 hours in a day, but it just felt like more time. Now we're just so rushed. I mean, maybe that's part of it. So,
well, and I think you try to get so much into it. I mean, high school classes are starting at early bird starts at like 7 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, that's true.
And you have some kids who go till 4 o'clock in the afternoon. That is a long day.
That's a very long day.
Because you think about the work we do, and that's essentially 8 to 5, just shifted an hour. And you have high schoolers going to school earlier than adults are going to work. And we already know that adolescents need more sleep than even their parents.
Yeah.
And getting enough sleep is a prime indicator of stress.
Right. Yep, we talked about that. We do have a publication that you can take a quiz on. How vulnerable are you to stress? So we encourage you to check out our Burley County Extension website and take that quiz to see if you might be in this demographic right now. Okay, there's 3 different types of stress that especially adults can come around with, can experience. And the first one is routine. Like, what's your daily stress, right? We've probably already had it in the morning here. Changes, things that are sudden negative changes. This can be significant, like all of a sudden you find out you're sick or you lose your job or somebody, is no longer like a divorce relationship. Then you can also have traumatic events, which I would argue probably divorce is a traumatic event. But this could be like a car accident and all of a sudden acute thing. And so it's good to know that you have crisis mode stress as well as, you can have daily stress that builds up. So we got to watch for signs of things.
Right.
So when it comes to being a parent now or watching children, do you have any signs to look for youth?
Yeah, and kids all show stress differently, just like adults. And they have a different ability to cope with things. One thing that you see a lot with kids especially are changes in behavior and regressions of behavior. So if you have a kid who's been potty trained for years and all of a sudden is wetting the bed at night, that could be a definite indicator of a stress or of something physically wrong. But when I always look at the preschools because that's kind of the age range that my kids are. Some behaviors can include, when they're signs and symptoms of stress, include irritability, anxiety, uncontrollable crying, trembling with fright, eating, or sleep problems. Then oftentimes you see toddlers regress to infant behavior or feel angry and not understand their feelings. We see this a lot with kids when they get a new sibling. And as a parent, it's stressful for us because now we have another person living in our home. But for that child, it's also a stressor because they're now dealing with somebody new in their house who may be taking more of mom and dad's time. And so that's why we see a lot of those regressive behaviors during that time.
Okay.
And then if you move into elementary age kids, some reactions to stress may include withdrawal, feeling of being unloved, being distrustful, not attending school or friendships, having difficulty naming their feelings. And then when we go into preteens and adolescents, again, those adolescents have growing pains and are typically rebellious. I mean, that's what defines your adolescent years.
Right.
It doesn't matter if you are the best goody good two shoes out there. You have to test the waters. It's just part of being human.
It's being a teen.
But there may be sleep disturbances, go off by themselves, kind of self-isolate, be agitated, act irresponsibly. In adolescence, we often see an increase in skin problems, whether that's acne or whatever. But with stress, it only increases. And so these are very basic signs that if you notice in your kids, you need to maybe even just have a conversation with them. And maybe you'll find out something's going on at school or they didn't do too well on a math test. But it's important as a parent to create kind of a safety net for your kids.
Right. That same publication where you can take the quiz to see if you're vulnerable to stress right now has some other points about, being able to see the signs of stress with your youth. I think it did say something about, and I don't know what age group, but, before they're 18, that they can experience tics and different, winking or nervous twitches or something like that. So I know that my brother was very stressed when he was younger, and he did have that, and he was always had bloodshot eyes. There's another thing that this publication, I believe, had. So
When I get stressed, my eye twitches.
your eye twitches.
And
Yeah.
it's super, super annoying. And I've even talked to my eye doctor about it.
Yep.
And he's like, well, stop being so stressed. I'm
Okay.
like, thanks a lot for that advice.
Have you asked him, does it have to do with blood pressure a little bit? I mean, because your blood pressure can rise. You can actually physically
He
feel
didn't
this.
say anything about that.
Okay, I was just curious. So talking about symptoms with children, also common symptoms that you can experience as an adult. Loss of appetite, or you're more hungry.
Stress
You tend
eater.
to- yeah, stress eat.
I'm totally a stress eater.
Right.
That's one of my, when I get stressed or frustrated, I gravitate towards food. And that's not a healthy habit.
Right,
at all.
right. I mean,
Because it's usually not an apple or strawberries or watermelon.
or apples. I'm glad you said apples. She knows I love apples. You're very low on energy, which is something that really strikes me for sure. Low on energy. You can fall into crying spells. It's hard to concentrate. You're always worrying, which affects your sleep. Your muscles can actually start aching and be tense because you can't relax. And so I think it's interesting. We're working right now with a program called Powerful Tools for Caregivers. This program does focus on those who are caring for someone else currently, more than likely with a chronic disease or a lifetime disease. A lot of the caregivers that we see right now in our class do struggle with their spouses having dementia or memory loss, and this program is all about managing stress for the caregiver, because right now the caregiver isn't caring for themselves as much as they probably should be. And it also talks about how to communicate in relationships with that type of situation. But this program really helps to recognize that the early signs of stress, the earlier the better. And what also it does is it helps you determine if it manifests in a physical way or an emotional or mental way. Okay, there's two different categories, and then you can have both is how they do it. And I think the interesting thing is that if you happen to be a physical stress type person, meaning, and I honestly have to say my husband is like this a little bit. His stress level will affect his blood pressure. Almost, it's like immediate. It's
That's not good.
unbelievable. I know. And so, if you manifest stress, if it manifests in your body in a way that's physical, they suggest to actually mitigate with physical ways to handle it, such as working out. It's a physical way to then de-stress your body.
I'm kind of glad that's not how I respond to stress.
Okay, so you're more of a mental. Are you a worrier? You lose sleep? Or
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Some of these types of
I
things.
can't think of the last time I had the urge to be like, I'm really stressed. I'm going to go
I
run.
know, I know. Well, okay, bubble baths fall into that physical. So I love bubble baths. So I mean, for the most part, I don't think I'm
Where
a
does
physical.
drinking wine fall into?
Okay, drinking wine is not the right choice, but on occasion, I suppose. But so there's other ways to, you can, whatever your choice is, pray about it. We'll get back into how to mitigate stress after the break here. Okay.
Right now, 32.
Here's Sean Hannity, weekday afternoons on Super Talk 1270.
Good morning. Welcome back to Extension Connection. This is Chandra Zeman-Bolensky with Burley County. I think I said that.
Just in case you didn't know where we were from.
I'm the Family and Consumer Sciences agent, and I'm joined here with Amelia Dahl. She is the 4-H Youth Development Agent. We're talking about stress, and we're talking about how to manage it, how to recognize it, and a few ways to make sure that you're doing the right thing that is, for your body, the way that you actually handle stress. And it can be physically or mentally. And if you're a physical stress person, if stress manifests its way in your body physically, meaning an increased heart rate, your muscles are always tense, you feel like you constantly need to get a massage, your blood pressure could even increase.
Does this also have the people who just feel so like you can't do anything, like the opposite end, like the lethargic?
Yeah, right. Yes and no. A lot of times that's more mental. But your body is then affected physically, so yes. And it can be both. You can actually be somebody in both categories. The other significant category that's really more mentally stressful is the worrying, the I can't sleep, I can't shut off my mind type person. And if you're both, they say that actually yoga is probably the most effective, or something like Tai Chi, where you incorporate physical movements, but it's all about calming your body down, stretching it out, and
maybe that's my problem.
Not
I
rushing
can't
around.
do yoga to save my life.
well, it might be time for you to start touching your toes or something.
I can't. I've never been able to touch my toes. Do you
I
remember
know.
in
It
gym
can be
class
intimidating.
when you had to
The stretching.
Yeah, I could barely reach the bar that.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
I
All
blame
right.
my long torso and
Yeah,
my long
you are
legs.
tall. Yeah, definitely. So, well, okay. I mean, there's other things. They even have those adult coloring books out there now.
I love those.
I do too. Do you have any?
I have 3.
Okay. Everybody should have one of these.
Yes.
I really think so.
I'm a
And this
strong
is one of
proponent
those
of them.
mental de-stressors. Okay. And so, and that's good that we probably both have one, because I think we're both mental stressors. I'm a little bit physical too, but my palms will sweat a little bit. And I know that when my palms are sweating, because I really am not a sweater, I know that I'm probably a little stressed.
Look at your hands.
I know.
Feeling a little stressed.
And sometimes people say, well, your hands are really soft. It's like, okay, you don't know how often I'm stressed right now because they don't need lotion. So the coloring books, this is something that can focus your mind, and you're not thinking about things. Your mind isn't able to race, and it can be very therapeutic. Those of us who like to do crafts, some of us, it stresses us out. Like for me, I was saying that golf was supposed to be calming, and it was for a while until I started getting a little bit more competitive with myself on it. Then it was no longer a de-stressor, it was a stressor. So, that sport can de-stress some people, and it can stress others.
And I
Same
think
thing
that's
with
the
crafts.
same thing with anything.
Yeah.
Because what I find as a de-stressor, you may find as a total stressor.
Right. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about sources of stress right now. And the reason why we're going to do this is because one of the most important things that you can have in your arsenal of how to get rid of stress is you need to make sure that you can recognize it and identify the things that cause you stress. Okay? We want you to identify things that are causing stress in your life right now so that you can manage them. And the earlier that you recognize, the better. And we keep saying that, so that's an important part of the message. And so this is for adults. I'll let Amelia get into the youth portion. Especially when you're in midlife, you have the job stress. This can be earlier in life too. We have caregiving stress, just like we talked about if you happen to have a grandparent, a parent, a spouse, a sibling that needs to be taken care of. And oftentimes this is chronically for long term. That can be very stressful. Worry in general. Financial strain. I've heard there's no stress like money stress. And I think I agree with that. Divorce. Sandwich generation. Do you know what that means?
The people who don't fall into either generation?
That's what I thought too. Actually, what this means is that it's usually people in, kind of my generation where you have to take care of your parents and your children. So you're in the middle of the
Gotcha.
generations so you're kind of caregiving for both. That can be significant. Retirement, and you're worried about it, but it's a ways off, but what are you going to do? And, there can be other things. Later in life, so if you're a senior out there, widowhood can be very stressful. Changes in your health are significant at that point. And we're talking usually 55 plus, even 65 plus years old. Financial uncertainty, financial strain, because you might not be working anymore. So hopefully there is some income there. Caregiving, again, loneliness, grief, retirement, raising grandkids. Raising grandkids can be very significantly challenging.
And you see a lot of that nowadays of grandparents raising their grandchildren. And I think that's stressful for both the grandparents as well as the kids.
The children. Yeah. What types of stressors, do you have any there for the youth side? Things that cause stress?
For kids, it really, a lot of those same ones that Shauna just talked about for the adults. Death, divorce, remarriage, moving.
Okay.
Moving's a big one. As parents, we often think, we're moving to this new house, this new place, great opportunities. Kids see that as, I have to leave what I'm comfortable with, maybe go to a new school, leave their friends, depending on if they're moving across town or cross country. That whole support network that they had is gone. This is a big stressor for military families.
Right. They move a lot. Yeah.
They move a lot, and that's a tough place to be as a kid because you don't ever want to get too established because you know that in 2 or 3 years, mom and dad are going to move again. Long illness, abuse, family or community violence, natural disaster, fear of failure. This kind of goes to that job-related one for older adults.
Right.
As an adult, you're worried about performing well in your job. As a kid, it may be getting an A on your math test or not thinking you're going to pass science. Those are stressors that parents quickly forget what it was like to be in those situations.
Right.
Cultural conflict may also heighten stress. So there's a variety of things that stress kids out, and a lot of what stresses kids out is picking up on the fact that their parents are stressed.
That's
so
true.
If they have a parent who's showing signs of stress, kids are going to absorb that. Several months ago, we talked about talking to your kids about terrorism.
Right.
And that's a big thing with kids is they absorb what you as a parent or you as that adult in their life are feeling, are doing, are acting. So we need to be cognizant of how we are handling our stress for our kids. And we need to model good behaviors so that they know that, hey, stress is okay. It's a natural part of life. There's no way you're going to live without stress. However, there are things to do and ways to cope to ensure that it's not detrimental to your health.
Right. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about coping methods. Then we're going to get into what to do about these stressors. We want you to recognize them. That's the first part in your personal action plan, we're going to call it. So that's why we gave you suggestions of possible stressors that you could, and if you think about it, kind of do that while you're listening along with us and pick the top 2 or 3. Don't pick any more than 3 for now, because as you start
stress
working
about
on
stress.
That, right. Don't stress about stress. I don't even know that. I would be the stressor of stress, I think, probably. But let's talk about coping methods. There can be negative coping methods as well as positive methods. Okay, so let's talk about positive methods. There's a few categories, and I was talking about this a little bit earlier: mental, physical. There can be spiritual. This particular publication, it's on our website, Burleigh County Extension. They have diversion in here, like learning, nourishment, work, getaways, hobbies, biofeedback. These can be positive, especially if you're doing it on a scale that's realistic. An example of a negative coping method for the getaways is you're relying on your 1 weekend or your 1 week vacation a year, and that's 8 months away. And you're like, I just can't wait to go to, Mexico or whatever it is. But what are you going to do for the next 8 months? To
be stressed
calm
about
yourself
it.
down. Yeah. So you want to make sure that's a realistic time frame. Some positive coping methods can be commitment. Take care of those relationships that you have. And I tell you what, I'm not the expert here when it comes to communication. I'm learning that. And I feel like this might be one of the reasons why I'm in this job, because I have all of these resources at my fingertips. And every time I learn a new lesson, I'm like, this applies to me. I need to start doing this more. And here's something important for everybody to know. When you're taking care of your relationships, The more I see this, using I statements versus you statements, actually make sure that you're communicating how you feel instead of saying you need to do this. I feel upset when this happens. Communicate how you feel, and it really can help the audience that you're working with. Well, we're going to take a break. We're going to talk about truly how to handle stress now at the end of the show, your personal action plan when we come back.
Right now, it's 34.
The home for ABC News at the top of the hour is Super Talk 1270.
Welcome back to Extension Connection. You're joined here this week by Burleigh County. My name is Chandra Zeman-Belinsky. I'm the Family and Consumer Sciences Agent, and I'm joined here with Amelia Dahl, our 4-H and Youth Development Agent. This is perfect because we're talking about how to manage stress. Everybody has stress at one point or another, more than likely, whether you're young or a senior. And we're talking about how to, at this point in the show, how to cope with stress. And we're going to get into helping out with an action plan. It's really all about noticing the factors, being aware of the factors that cause you stress, noticing that it's affecting you as early as you can. So if you happen to have tense shoulders and you know this is the way that you handle stress, if you're tense, start recognizing that. The earlier the better. And we talked about positive coping methods just before the break. Let's talk about negative coping methods. Ways that you're trying to handle stress, but they're not good for you. They only get you from point A to point B in a short period of time. It's not a long-term coping mechanism that's healthy.
So this is where my glass of wine falls.
Yes. I was just thinking that. Your alcohol, especially in excess, withdrawal, tobacco, you can be in denial, constant worrying, or even just worrying. Fault finding. This is where those you statements versus I statements come in. The best way to take care of your relationships, which can be a positive coping method, nurturing your relationships. So you want to do that in a positive way, so not fault finding. To say, I am stressed when you say this versus you need to stop saying this to me, using the I statements versus the you statements, and really putting yourself in that other person's shoes. If you can do that, you're really going to drop your guard together. And it's about having an us conversation, not a you versus me.
Yeah, isn't there a saying before, like, to walk a mile in someone's shoes, then you're a mile away and you have their shoes?
Where's that one from? Oh, I like that, though. But you should walk in somebody's shoes. So stubbornness, doesn't necessarily work.
This was me. This is something that I did very well growing up, and I'm getting better at stubbornness when I'm stressed. But I was the kid who would hold my breath until I passed out and throw temper tantrums until my parents thought something was mentally wrong with me. So for those of you parents out there who have a kid like that, we do get better. We are able to work in the workforce.
Right. So there are negative coping methods. We want to switch over to the positive coping methods. It could be surrender, owning that ounce of, responsibility that you might have in the situation. It can be time management. I tell you what, I'm learning that if I've really got to have a plan in the beginning of the week for what meals we're going to have through the week. And most moms that have been doing this for a while already have that down. For us, we were able to wing it. We're active people, my husband and I. Well, with the little guys, it's not going to work like that anymore. And so I've got to have a plan, time management.
And that takes a huge stressor off of when you get home from work. And I don't know about at your house, but at my house, it's, well, what are we going to make for supper? I don't know. What do you want? I don't know. What do you want?
Yep.
And by the time you actually make supper, you're mad at your spouse because they wouldn't tell you what you wanted to have for supper. So it helps a lot when you do it.
And actually this week I'm going in and I always have ideas in the cupboard. I didn't really have a plan down, and I do feel a little more stressed even, after work. And so you don't need that. Mm-hmm. So even if you've got kind of some ideas, whatever you need to manage, I know I need to manage that. Organizing can be very good. I spent this whole weekend doing that. I felt no wonder why it flew by because I was trying to organize.
You were working all weekend.
Yeah. So, there's some positive ways. Let's get into the best way to manage stress is a little action plan here. There's 5 steps to the action plan. The last one, the 6th one, is actually give yourself a little celebration. Decide how you're going to celebrate. But let's get into the steps here. Write the 2 major stressors down. Okay, so we're saying top 2. I said you can pick 3 if you want to. Write the 2 major stressors down. So you're going to see what you go through in maybe a day, maybe a week, and things that might have stressed you. Actually, be aware of them by writing them down. Determine a realistic goal for every stressor that you've written down. So both for each stressor. A realistic goal. So, let's think of a scenario here. Can you think of something?
Sure, work.
Yeah, so work. How are you going to manage work stress? Well, first of all, we kind of do it on a weekly basis. If you sit down as a team and you know what's kind of coming up that week, at least you know where your resources are. Actually, looking at your team is one of the biggest fundamentals in that 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, too. You look at a week. If you look at a month, it can be a little overwhelming. If you look at a day, you're not far enough out. But when it comes to short term, look at your time frame. That was a good example, I suppose. So write down how you're going to your realistic goal to manage each stressor. The next one is identify activities or strategies for each goal. Okay, so if your stressor is work, and for me, I like to do yoga. So Amelia will not be going to yoga with me.
I will not be joining you with yoga.
But that could be you want to get yoga in twice a week or something. So an action plan is the biggest fundamental to our powerful tools for caregivers class that we're doing right now. We require that everybody picks something that they're going to do, and we hold them accountable. We start every class with, how'd you do? And it may sound a little structured, but I tell you, it keeps you on track.
Well, and this is something good to show your kids, too, that it's okay to be stressed as long as you have a plan to deal with it.
Right, a plan.
And with kids, it's hard to sit down and have an action plan, but having them write about the problem and self-taught and then tell you what they think will make them feel better is kind of the kid version of the action plan.
Okay, good. So you can incorporate them in this. Good. Determine how much time you'll need to reach each goal. If it's, and you can keep it short term. If it's, when we recommend weekly and kind of revisit that every week. Think about, and the last one is think about how you might fulfill that goal and give yourself a celebration at the end of it. If you're able to stick to your action plan 4 weeks in a row, treat yourself to a massage or whatever it is. So make sure that you're celebrating your positives.
And I just have a few fun things to do with your kids to help them relieve stress. And this is good for both you and kids. This is where the coloring book comes in. I find I've always used coloring as a stress reliever. And now that they have adult coloring books, I feel a little less childish when I sit there color.
Thank you, people who created this for us.
I used to color all the time. But
yeah.
One major stress relief for kids, and again, maybe I'm just a kid at heart because all of these sound like wonderful stress relievers to me. Paper ripping.
Yeah.
When I was in college.
Man.
Right?
Drake does that all the time.
Yep. Kids love it. Big stress relief. And it's funny.
He is. He will just sit there and rip paper.
Yep. I love to put paper into the shredder. There's something so relaxing about it. So if you see me...
why we never have shred stuff? I mean,
no, there's somebody else in the office who also likes to shred. Finger painting. It's a good finger activity.
Yep.
Active play. Make sure your kids have active play every day. It's important for kids to be able to run around, play with balls, go outside, even when it's cold. Even if they're outside for only a few minutes, it's healthy for them. Good physical activity is a great stress relief.
Okay, yes.
And especially for kids, laugh together. I think kids can be some of the biggest stressors in your life, but they can also be some of the biggest stress reliefs in your life.
Yep.
Sometimes you laugh at some of the silliest things when you have a toddler. And you're probably getting to this point with Drake that
Sure.
he'll do something funny and you start laughing, and then he starts laughing and you're laughing at the fact that he's laughing, and before you know it, you forget what you were originally laughing about.
For sure.
One last one is modeling clay. This is also a good way to help kids communicate what's stressing them. If you're working with young kids, they may not be able to tell you, put a word to it or how they're
Sure.
feeling. Get out some clay, some Play-Doh. Let them get their hands dirty. Heck, make your own clay at home. And just put your fingers in it, get down in it with the kids, because it is a good stress relief. And you may in the beginning feel childish, but I guarantee you that after you're done, you're going to forget a lot of the worry that you went into it with.
You know, and actually, I like what you just said, because you shouldn't worry about feeling childish. And I used to when I would play with toddlers and things. And I said to the adults, you probably think I'm just crazy right now, how silly I'm being. And the one lady said, I would never think anybody is being silly when they're playing with children. It really validated that you don't need to worry about it.
Yep.
So, yep.
Definitely. So make sure you're having fun with your kids, because it will not only reduce stress in your life, but you'll create some wonderful memories.
Yes, so good luck on your action plan. You know what? Just be aware of it. Write them down. Write down some goals. And keep yourself in check maybe on a weekly basis. We wish you the very best. Give us a call at the office if you need any help managing stress. It's 221-6865. Thanks for joining us.